Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the Shark Byte TX5R.1. This new little Shark Byte board here. And obviously it has a little bit of a wider stance. We'll get to some of the measurements. The major developments I think with this, and one I'll show you as a kind of a comparison, but it's not really a documented development, is it might have better penetration or range. And again, we'll get to that here in a little bit. I'll compare it to my Shark Byte Whoop board. Also, this one officially supports smart audio. Why is that a big deal? Well, if you're racing Shark Byte and you have a radio, sorry this is so big, and you want to assign, say, one of the buttons across your TX16S to a particular band or channel, or a power level, or pit mode, you can do that. You could also set them to switches as well. So that's really a major development. Also, they have now changed some of the structure. Let's take a finer look at the board here. You can see that the board has some pretty sizable holes in it, and it has what I would also call some sizable gummies here that go through those holes. That could be to help for shock protection, you know, when you have a crash or you wang something, that the board has more absorption built into these gummies. I do have everything laid out that you do get. The other development is the UFL here. We really have two opportunities to secure the UFL antenna down. You can use one of the included zip ties, which you just kind of thread over where it loops over the top of your UFL, and then you zip it down. Or we have this little bracket that you would put across the top, and then with these screws and these nuts, then you can secure it down that way as well. Let's measure and weigh the board real quick, and we'll get right to the flight footage. The board itself weighs just about 6.8 grams. The board with its gummies weighs just about 7.5 grams. If we add the metal bits to secure down our UFL, it comes to just about 7.85 grams. Of course, if you use a zip tie, it'll add less. The board measures 45 millimeters in length and 27 millimeters in width. And of course, for your flight stack, it's a 20 millimeter by 20 millimeter flight stack. So for our wiring, we've got ground, we've got power. This is TX, which goes to RX on your flight controller, which is the green. The yellow wire here is your RX, which goes to your TX on your flight controller. White is do not connect, so you need to take that one out. And the gray, or this purplish color here, that is our smart audio that goes to our SA or TX port, and we turn that UART on in beta flight. Here is my flight, and this is just my flying space. So if you're comparing this to standard analog, you'll be kind of doing a comparison of other flights of mine. You can see that we've got quite a bit of humidity because we have water laying all over the yard. I spent a couple days getting rain, and this will just give you some sort of idea. Of course, in races, you pretty much are always within line of sight of your quads. You don't have too many obstructions, but for those who aren't necessarily racing strictly at a field, maybe you're out practicing and there are some trees or something of that nature, this may help you give some sort of idea about the reception of this new board. Of course, durability is kind of a long-term issue that we kind of have to get this in more people's hands, more crashes, and more experiences out there. But I do swoop around the front of the house, and this is something that we'll do a comparison for. The white pickup is a contractor there, Chad. But I'm going to be comparing this to the Whoop board, and this is on 200 millivolts, which is the maximum power output this particular board has. It has pit mode, which is 0.1, and then it has 25 milliwatts, and it also has 200 milliwatts. So hopefully this gives you some representation of, you know, the reception that you'll get. Remember, I am sitting in the backyard of the house, and I'm sitting at that table right where we took off. So we're getting a fair bit distance away from the quad, and I'm actually going to go into some fairly hairy circumstances here. Got a little bit snowy there as we loop around my neighbor's house as well. So for a portion of that little curve, we kind of had two houses in our way. Of course, there's various vegetation. Again, there is that humidity in the air from all the moisture that we've had. I couldn't give you an exact humidity rating. I forgot to look that up, but many storms. This happened to be a particular day that had nice sun. And but it was one of those days where you walk outside and you're kind of sitting still at the table and you find yourself starting to sweat. Just the humidity is pretty high. Kind of a fun thing, I guess. Your goggles start to slide down your face and stuff like that. But we do a couple other things of just trying to put stuff between me and the quad to see how the reception is. Also, the camera in this particular test is the Run Cam camera that came initially when Shark Byte launched. So if you're judging something outside of reception and you're wondering what the camera is, it is the original run cam. When I do a comparison with the Whoop board, that is the Foxeer Digicam that we're going to be seeing there. That also helped me keep it pretty straight as far as what I was flying at the time I was flying it. So we've looped around my house, we've looped around my neighbor's house, we put a few things kind of in our way to give us a ability to grade out the reception, and I've hinted to it, and I think this one is better. Now, it could be better because my other boards are kind of beat up from me flying them over the last few months. That's possible. I am going to be running the same Cherry Rush antenna on both quads. I'll show those to you before we cut to that footage, and that way I kept it as level as possible without having two identical quads, which I just don't have. I give so much stuff away on the channel that having two identical quads is pretty rare. About the only two identical quads I have might be one of the TKS frames, but I think I've kind of done varying builds with both of those as well. So two identical quads, just I think I come closer in whoops. I think that's where my two identical quads is the closest. But that was just some fun flying and doing a little punch out. I'm going to circle a little bit of water on the ground. So before we move on, a little cautionary warning. When I got this out of the bag, the zip ties have this little curl on them, the way they come in the bag. And when I pulled them out, one of these nuts went flying across my desk, and I spent probably about 15 to 20 minutes looking for that one particular nut. I saw the direction that it headed. It actually went over that way. But they're so small, and I've got kind of a off-camera, messy desk. When you pull out your zip ties, be careful you don't have anything kind of pulling out with the zip ties, especially these little nuts. So the two quads I'm flying here, this is an old Airblade UAV frame. It's a 3-incher, and of course I've got my Shark Byte, my TX5R.1 in it. And then I'm going to be doing a comparison with the GepRC Phantom. You note I do have identical antennas in both of these. Of course, the mounting isn't identical. I did what I could to kind of stuff this up in the air to make it similar to this one. So not quite as proud in the case of the Whoop board, but at least I'm running the same antennas. But let's take a look at this footage. Because there isn't a whole lot of it that lines up, you probably want to slow this way down. So my voice may sound funny, or you may want to mute it and slow it down. But in the top is where we've got the new board, the race band only board. If I haven't mentioned that already, this only uses the race band channels and frequencies. And on the bottom board, we've got the Whoop board, the Shark Byte Whoop board. And so you'll be able to see those at different times and where they're at and the reception and how they kind of compare. But to me, it was pretty dang apparent that when it came to the Whoop board, that going around to the front of the house, that the reception wasn't nearly as good as it is on this new board. So that to me, if everything else is equal, like I said, if the banging around that I've done on my old Whoop board hasn't harmed its reception in some way, that to me indicates that they've made some additional improvements to the hardware that allows it to get better penetration. And I kind of loop that through a few times there so that you have an ability to look at it maybe more than once. Again, using the gear icon in YouTube to be slowing that playback down to where you can diagnose whether I'm crazy or I'm telling tales out of school, or maybe you agree with me as well. So I see that a few vendors are starting to carry this board, and I think the biggest concern is the length. Of course, I'm a micro guy, and so I did have to find a kind of a long-bodied 3-incher in order to put mine in. It might be easier, but I do suspect that a lot of racing frames aren't going to be that long-bodied, so that measurement in the beginning, you want to make sure that you've got that distance and maybe a little bit more because you're going to have a connector. You can do what I did with the connector and just have it up front. So I had room between my camera. Of course, as I camera angle up, this little piece may have to finesse down below the connector here. But the length of the board is going to be something you're definitely going to keep your eye on as far as your mounting purposes, because it is going to stick out beyond your stack, and usually more than most of our other components do. I currently see it at Race Day Quads for $88, and that's the introductory price that I see on Race Day Quads. Other sites may have this as well. And if you're interested in this particular board, I will have a link down in the video description to all the different vendors where I can find it. Vote with your dollar. Buy from your favorite vendor, maybe the vendor that's closest to you or ships the fastest to you. They probably won't be in stock long. You know, we've got stock problems in this hobby, as well as just about anything that has electronics in it anymore. So if you are interested, not to give you the hard sell, but if you are interested, you may want to pull the trigger if you do find it in stock at one of the vendors I have linked in the video description. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. It does not come with an antenna, if I didn't say that once or twice already. Race band only. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.